Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Friday, 15th of February, and here's a couple of comments since my last video. In Saudi Arabia, a 6-year-old boy was beheaded with a piece of broken glass in front of his screaming mother in Medina. He was in a taxi with his mother, travelling to the shrine of the Prophet Muhammad. Upon arrival, the taxi asked her, "Are you Shia?" to which she replied, "Yes." The driver then got out of his car, wrenched the boy away from his mother, smashed a glass bottle he grabbed from a coffee table nearby, and stabbed and slashed the boy in the neck. Police tried to stop the man attacking the boy, but were unsuccessful. He was then restrained until more police arrived and was arrested. The conflict between Sunni and Shia Muslims date back to the year 632 AD and the death of the Prophet Muhammad, when you had a split in Islam to those that most suitable for a successor of Muhammad, with the Sunnis believing that the successor must be part of the Prophet's family and bloodline and called a caliph, and the Shia Muslims believing in an imam who must be of good character and is considered to be infallible. More from that canary in the coal mine in Sweden. Last Sunday a man died in Stockholm by blowing himself up in an apartment, apparently trying to assemble a bomb. Later on that day was another explosion which damaged 2 buildings. Also on Sunday morning in Rosengarten, another explosion in the stairwell of an apartment block, damaging several doors, and in Landskrona an explosion at 2 a.m. on Monday morning damaged windows and set off car alarms. This was the 4th explosion in 24 hours. Malmo, with a population of 300,000 people, is said that it was the most deadly region in Sweden, with 14 dead and 28 injured in shootings during 2018. And in the city of Kalmar, there was a report of another rape of a woman. With last year's statistics, this is the equivalent of 21 rapes per day. Sunday night also saw 15 cars set on fire in the city of Gävle, which is 100 miles north of Stockholm. So the next time somebody recommends the Swedish model to you, you might just keep all of this in mind. Here's an interesting one for those that are critical of Donald Trump's insistence of building a wall/fence between the USA and Mexico to stop migrants and refugees pouring into America. Do they know about the EU-funded wall that runs between Turkey and Syria, which is 475 miles long and 10 feet high, has manned and unmanned watchtowers along it, and uses the latest electronic equipment including heat detection cameras? The wall is made up of large slabs of concrete and has a road running beside it, with the EU giving Turkey over 100 million in security and surveillance equipment and the construction of armoured Cobra II style military vehicles. In Italy, 2 migrants who were aboard a rescue ship that saw migrants threaten the crew members have opened a case against Matteo Salvini with the European Courts of Human Rights over tweets they claim could jeopardise their rights to a fair trial. The migrants, a Ghanaian and a Sudanese, are currently under investigation for threats of violence and resistance towards a public official regarding their part in the hijacking of the ship Vos Thalassa. The incident took place last year in July and saw African migrants threaten to kill the crew after the Libyan Coast Guard attempted to bring them back to Libya. The crew described the situation as going from a rescue to piracy, with the migrants forcing the crew to chart a course north to Italy. Those on board the Vos Thalassa were then transferred to the Italian Coast Guard ship Doherty, but were barred from landing in Italy until a redistribution agreement was made with other European countries. Mr. Salvini wrote on Twitter, "Before granting authorization, I want to know the names, surnames and the nationalities of the violent hijackers who will have to get off the ship Doherty in handcuffs. I wonder which charity, human rights group or NGO put this in their mind. What utter nonsense. An act of piracy and get charged like a pirate. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. When does human rights actually become human wrongs? When the legal profession can make some money out of it." The Austrian Interior Minister has banned several extremist symbols, including those from the Turkish Grey Wolves, Muslim Brotherhood and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, along with 10 others, with the ban coming into effect from March the 1st, with offenders being fined up to €4,000 and €10,000 for repeat offenders. There has been sporadic street violence between rival Turkish and Kurdish gangs, and Austria has taken issue with Turkish supporters who took to the streets to show support for President Erdogan after the attempted coup in 2016 and last year's national elections, with the Vice Chancellor Heinz Christian Strache saying, "I recommend all Turks in Austria who voted for Erdogan should return to Turkey." And now for some domestic issues. In the Sunday Business Post, there was an interesting article about 4 out of the 11 Irish MEPs, Brian Crowley, Matt Carthy, and Sinn Féin's Lynn Boylan and Leah Ní Riada, who will not disclose the amount they claim in allowances. They are entitled to a salary of $102,000 annually. Interesting, Leah Ní Riada, at the launch of her presidential campaign, said that the president's salary should be halved and, quote, "It is unacceptable that hundreds of thousands of euros of expenses are unvouched." How about that? MEPs are allowed to claim general expenses and allowances up to €4,500 per month unvouched. So is that short-term memory or hypocrisy? In Rooskey, at around 9 p.m. on Monday night, another fire took place in an arson attack, the second in 5 weeks at the Shannon Key West Hotel, which was due to accommodate up to 80 economic migrants / asylum seekers in the next couple of weeks, which was described by Sinister Minister David Stanton as worrying events. On Shannonside Radio, the Minister yet again talked about the role that organisations like Friends of the Centre play in setting up the Direct Provision Centre. No thought that these organisations are getting funded from the state to carry out the wishes of the government, even if it is against the majority of the wishes of the community. Isn't it amazing that rural Ireland is being decimated of its youth employment prospects and the defunding of support for banks and post offices, and yet can suddenly find funds to sponsor activities carried out by the so-called Friends of the Centre? Rooskey, since the closure of the meat processing plant in 2003 and with the closure of the Shannon Key West Hotel in 2011, employment in the area has been badly hit. With a population of between 200 and 300, the only thing done for the community was in the last 16 years was the partial funding of a children's playground. And yet, when it was announced that the hotel would be turned into a direct provision centre, there would be funding provided for language classes, arts and craft, and computer classes, with up to 80% of asylum seekers' claims regarded as bogus by the Department of Justice, and with only 140 deportations out of 1,000 deportation orders carried out last year, there is an element that is using this situation to exploit it for personal gain. No doubt there will be another anti-racism rally this weekend with busloads of people and their tambourines, guitars and expensive camera equipment turning up, all from outside the community. I hope the people of Rooskey have the sense not to turn up like the last time. Avoid this demonstration like the plague, and do not acknowledge this event which should not be done in your name. In an article in the Dundalk Democrat that is mentions that due to the 38 direct provision centres across the state are already at maximum capacity, asylum seekers / economic migrants are now being housed in hotels in Louth, Cavan, Monaghan and Dublin, and has paid Trent Hall Limited $1.6 million since last September by the Department of Justice, following pressure on the Reception and Integration Agency to source emergency accommodation. Since January, 134 people have sought international protection in Ireland and has been given accommodation in hotels until a space in direct provision can be provided. There was another attempt to block Gemma Doherty's live stream following her latest stream on Monday night with Canadian Amazing Polly discussing why sustainable development is, in their words, is another word for communism, which has about 700 viewers on the live stream and by 8 p.m. this evening had been viewed 7,764 times. This block resulted in Gemma and some Yellow Vest protesters staging a sit-in in the European headquarters of Google in Barrow Street, Dublin, with a couple of live streams from Gran Torino outside the building, and Gemma putting up the occasional video on her Facebook page. A standoff between Gemma and her supporters, armed response police, Gardaí and Google staff, which started at 1 p.m. and eventually ended with them leaving the building over 12 hours later, with the reassurance that her live streams would not be blocked. Definitely a case of David, or in this case Gemma, versus Goliath, with Gemma winning. I was talking to a friend of mine who works for a public transport system run by a private operator, and an African employee, a female employee, he noticed that every 2 weeks she arrived at work with an elaborate hairstyle, and asked her about her, where did she get it done, and she was told that she told him that she was actually getting it paid for by the Department of Social Welfare. So here you have somebody in full-time employment getting what seems to be a wig allowance. How about that for lunacy? Now, I notice of a couple of new subscribers this week. Thanks very much. I look forward to your comments, and my thoughts are my own. Thanks for listening. Good night and good luck.